I don't choose these stories. They find me. Listen carefully. I found a notebook in a small church archive in Trujillo, the kind of place where the air feels older than the wood holding the shelves upright. A priest handed it to me without ceremony, a leather-bound journal with only 4 characters on the first page. Testimonio de RM, 1987. He looked at me as if deciding whether to warn me or stay quiet. In the end, he chose the middle ground. He wrote things, he said softly, that scared even the old clergy. Read it at your own risk. The first pages were harmless. A lonely machinist named RM, recently divorced, trying to keep his life stitched together. The writing was plain, almost dull, until, without warning, the tone ruptured. Something had disturbed him, something he couldn't explain in simple words. That's when the real story began. The first sign came as casually as a complaint about the weather. RM wrote, "Last night someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. Slow, like a woman with tired hands. But he lived alone. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty. He mentioned only 2 details: the sudden draft of cold air and a lingering smell of smoke mixed with wilted flowers, a scent deeply tied in Venezuelan folklore to a single figure. Ánima Sola, the lonely soul. At the time he dismissed it. He tried to rationalize. He told himself it must have been a neighbor, a prank, a dream. He didn't know she had only knocked to announce herself. Days later, fragments of confession appeared in his writing. A promise he'd made decades earlier. A simple mass offered in gratitude for a favor he'd begged from a deceased relative. He had vowed to pay for it as soon as life settled. Life never settled. He never fulfilled the promise. And in Venezuelan syncretic belief, promising something to the dead binds you with a thread that time does not cut. Forgetting the promise doesn't erase it. It angers it. RM remembered his grandmother's warning. A soul ignored becomes a soul offended. It was only then, reading those lines, that I understood who had knocked on his door. The notebook darkened quickly after that. At first, the change was subtle, not an event, but an atmosphere. RM began writing about a smell, not the occasional odor of an old house, nor the passing scent of neighbors cooking. This was different, persistent, specific, impossible to ignore. Smoke, but not fresh smoke. Something older, heavier, mixed with the faint sweetness of dying flowers left too long in stagnant water. It appeared without pattern, dissolving as suddenly as it arrived. One evening, unable to tolerate the uncertainty, he followed it. The smell seemed to drift toward the hallway where a structural column divided the living room from the corridor leading to his bedroom. He approached slowly, describing the sensation as walking into memory rather than air. 2 steps closer, the scent thickened. 1 step back, it vanished. He repeated the movement several times, unsettled by the precision of it. Inside the invisible boundary surrounding the column, the odor was unmistakable. Burnt wood, wilted petals, a faint trace of something medicinal, like incense extinguished with water. Outside it, nothing. He stood there for minutes, moving his hand through the empty space as though expecting resistance, trying to rationalize a phenomenon that behaved less like smell and more like presence. I felt foolish, he wrote, like a man trying to catch fog with his fingers. But the feeling beneath the confusion was not foolishness. It was anticipation. That night, he slept poorly, and sometime before dawn, the boundary dissolved. He wrote of waking at exactly 12:03 in the morning, the room trembling with a red glow, like fire seen behind a curtain. In the corner of his bedroom, a woman-shaped silhouette flickered, tall and thin, her features blurred as though he were watching her through hot air. She didn't move, he wrote. She only watched me breathe. After that night, the house turned restless. Footsteps roaming the hallway when no one was awake. Water running in the kitchen sink. A crucifix falling again and again as if pushed by an unseen hand. And one line chilled even me. Years later, a woman whispered my name from inside the wardrobe. I wasn't dreaming. I was sitting upright in bed. He heard her cry while she whispered. The visitation intensified. One night, he woke with a scream caught his throat. The ceiling was on fire, not the chaotic fire of accidents, not the desperate blaze of something consuming itself. This was ordered, deliberate, almost architectural in its movement. Thin streams of flame slid across the plaster like living veins, weaving patterns that formed and dissolved without smoke or sound. There was no crackling, no heat pressing against his skin, only light, a light so intense it forced his eyes to narrow, flooding the room with a deep red brilliance that seemed to pulse rather than shine. He described it as watching molten metal through closed eyelids. Instinctively, he pulled the blanket closer, expecting warmth. Instead, the air felt wrong. The temperature did not rise. It receded. A hollow cold expanded outward from the flames, draining the room of comfort, replacing it with the sterile chill of stone walls at night. The fire behaved like an absence of warmth rather than its source, a contradiction his mind struggled to process. I saw fire, he wrote, but my breath fogged in front of me. The longer he stared, the more unbearable the brightness became. His eyes watered. Dark spots drifted across his vision, yet he could not look away. The spectacle carried a disturbing elegance, a hypnotic quality that blurred the boundary between terror and awe. He felt the same pull one feels standing at the edge of a cliff, a silent invitation to keep watching something that should be escaped. The flames began to gather. What had been scattered strands of light slowly converged, folding inward until the chaotic geometry resolved into anatomy. A human figure formed out of the fire. Long arms, a thin neck, hair moving like red smoke underwater, eyes glowing like embers seen through ash. She hung in the air, not floating, hanging, as if suspended from a rope made of flame. For several seconds, neither moved. He watched. She watched. When she dissolved, the transformation reversed itself with unnatural calm. The figure fragmented into ribbons of light that spread across the ceiling before extinguishing all at once, leaving darkness that felt thicker than before. The room was left cold as a tomb, and the smell of burnt wood clung to the walls for hours. RM wrote, I touched the ceiling. It was cold. The fire had never been real, but she had. The entry dated September 14th shakes even the steadiest nerves. Tonight she came all the way in. I saw her face. He described her with excruciating detail. Skin cracked like baked clay, flames leaking from every fissure, chains dragging from her wrists, leaving thin trails of smoke on the floor. A mouth open in a scream he could not hear. Eyes full of despair, so heavy he felt it pressing on his chest like a physical weight. She walked toward him, her steps leaving behind black ash footprints that smudged into nothing moments later. You forgot me, she said. He dropped to his knees, sobbing, begging for forgiveness he barely remembered owing. She placed her hand, a hand of fire, on his chest. It was cold, he wrote, cold like ice burning inside my ribs. Then she whispered, promise kept is promise freed, and vanished. The final pages were shaky, the ink trembling as if he could barely hold the pen. He went to the church the next morning, still smelling faintly of smoke, and finally paid for the mass he'd promised decades ago. He wrote, she hasn't come back, but when candles flicker, I feel watched. His very last line reads, "I think she wasn't here to punish me. She was here to remind me the dead wait. And the longer they wait, the stronger they knock." When I closed the notebook, the room felt colder. I thought for a long time about what he had described, because what RM experienced did not exist in isolation. It echoed a figure whispered across Venezuelan towns, rural altars, roadside candles, and quiet promises spoken after midnight. A figure people rarely describe directly. They simply call her Ánima Sola. Was it psychological? The parish had documented strange burns on his skin that made it unlikely. Was it a demon? No. Ánima Sola belongs to a different category entirely. A human soul twisted by longing, regret, and promises unfulfilled. A figure not born of evil, but of waiting. In Venezuelan folklore, she is often imagined as a woman suspended in purgatorial fire, chains falling from her wrists, her face lifted toward a heaven she cannot yet reach. The flames that surround her do not consume her. They only remind her of what was lost and what remains unfinished. Some stories trace her origin far beyond Latin America, to an unnamed woman, sometimes called Celestina, who, out of fear, denied water to a condemned man thirsting on a cross. For that hesitation, legend says, she was left to wander between worlds, burning without burning, existing in the solitude of remorse. But in Venezuela, the legend evolved into something closer to lived experience. Here, she's remembered not only as a suffering soul, but as a collector of promises. People light candles for favors. They whisper petitions to the forgotten dead. And when those offerings are neglected, stories say the lonely soul returns, not in rage, but in insistence, to remind the living that a vow spoken to the invisible still binds the visible world. I finally said what I believed. Maybe some emotions, guilt, promises, grief, do not dissolve with the body. Maybe they cling to the world like smoke on old stone. RM's account mirrored that cultural memory with unsettling precision. The smell of extinguished candles, the cold fire, the chains, the quiet demand, not punishment, recognition. And then I added the truth RM seemed to understand too late. The frightening part isn't that something visited him. The frightening part is that she waited decades, because waiting is the defining condition of a lonely spirit. Waiting for prayers, waiting for remembrance, waiting for someone to fulfill what was promised, and knew exactly when to return. The case ends here, for now. Reality bends more easily than people can imagine.